Hi, my name is Natalie, and for my video today I'm going to talk about specific learning disabilities. So this has been a really interesting topic for me to research, and I have been very grateful for all that I've learned and for some of the mindsets, some of my mindsets that have changed. So first off, I just want to talk about what an actual learning disability is, about the actual definition of a learning disability. So this is a big long definition, but essentially a learning disability is any kind of disorder that has to do with the basic psychological processes that have to do with understanding. So anything with using language, anything with having trouble listening, thinking, speaking, reading, writing, spelling, or doing mathematical calculations. So all those really basic, core, fundamental things we learn in school and throughout our life, especially in our early developmental processes. A learning disability is when those processes are interrupted or halted, or a student cannot perform them, quote unquote, normally or up to par with other students in their same age group. So there are a lot of different learning disabilities. Some of them here are, this is just a list of a couple of them, and I'll just go through them quickly, explain kind of what they are. So an auditory processing disorder, that is when a student has a hard time differentiating between subtle differences in sound, hence the auditory processing disorder. So they have a hard time knowing what those differences are, and it makes it very confusing for a student to hear one word, thinking it's a totally different word, and understanding how that works in the context, and is very frustrating. So dysgraphia, that is, if you look at the picture here on this slide, dysgraphia is when students have a hard time, their handwriting is poor and their fine motor skills are impaired somehow. So obviously writing is a huge part of our communication, and especially in the earlier years as students are learning how to write the alphabet, how to do these things, that's a huge problem for a lot of the students who have messy handwriting. It seems like they just don't practice, when in reality they have an actual learning disability. And then we have language processing disorder, which is similar to auditory processing disorder, but a language processing disorder is when students hear specific phonemes or groups of sounds and have a hard time connecting those sounds with meaning. So it doesn't have anything to do with a physical disability. The inner ear and outer ear work just fine. The neurons fire correctly and transfer that information to the brain correctly, but that information cannot be processed, and that there's a disconnect between sound and meaning. Visual perceptual and visual motor deficient, that is when students have a hard time seeing any kind of information visually, whether it be signs, pictures, language, written words, and they have a hard time connecting those visual symbols or ways to express meaning with actual meaning. We have dyscalculia, which is any kind of problem that has to do with math, basically. It also can affect them with symbols, if they have trouble understanding symbols. And we have dyslexia, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, as well, a visual learning disability. And then nonverbal learning disabilities, when students have a hard time understanding nonverbal ways of expressing information. So this could be like facial expressions, body language, other things that are very common in our society. You can imagine how hard it would be for a student to go through or to have that learning disability, because so much of our communication is nonverbal. So those are just some of the learning disabilities that are pretty common. What it is not, a learning disability is not problems. It does not include problems that are a result of visual, hearing, or motor disabilities. So any kind of blindness, just because a student is sitting far away from the whiteboard and can't see because they don't have glasses and need them, is not cause to tell them they have a learning disability. If they are hearing impaired, if there's an actual physical problem with the inner or outer ear, that is not a learning disability. And motor disabilities, if they have some sort of physical ailments, physical impairment, that does not mean that they have a learning disability. As well, mental retardation is a completely separate separate thing here. Mental retardation is an actual low IQ, a lower intelligence, and those with learning disabilities generally actually have very standard intelligence, or even superior intelligence to CPSE in that way. Some of the smartest people in this world in our history have actually had specific learning disabilities. So a specific learning disability is not necessarily that they can't learn something because of their conditions outside of themselves, and it is not mental retardation or emotional disturbance or environmental, cultural, economic disadvantage, etc. But it is actually a disorder that just causes them to have specific areas that are difficult for them to learn or process information. So see, these are some of the signs that a child might have a learning disability, and these are some of the signs that parents should look at early on, try to see if their children might have a learning disability. Things like difficulty learning the alphabet, reading, directions, problems paying attention, listening as they're, playing or in classroom settings as well, difficulty remembering, staying organized. And I think it's important to remember that this doesn't necessarily mean that those children do have a learning disability, but rather these are signs that they might have a learning disability. And this is something that's so hard with classroom settings, is because it's so hard for children to necessarily diagnose a learning disability. It's all based on the actual symptoms, on the things that happen. We can't go into their brain and see what's wrong. And so it's important to remember that this doesn't mean they necessarily have one, but just to be aware that these are signs that a student might have a learning disability. We don't know all of the causes for every learning disability, but some of them are hereditary. It's known that a lot of families have large histories of learning disabilities, and it continues on throughout their generations. Teratogenic factors, like that's anything that happened to a child during development while they were in the mother's womb. So fetal alcohol syndrome, any kind of smoking, drugs, alcohol, trauma, physical trauma, or malnutrition, those kinds of things. Medical factors after the fact that the baby was born, things like lack of oxygen in those first moments of being born, or any kind of sickness that the child might have, swelling in the brain that might cause them to have a learning disability. And then environmental factors, things like malnutrition for extended periods of time. These kinds of things can affect children in ways that might be the reason why they have learning disabilities. But again, we don't know all of the causes. These are just some of the things that are generally correlated with a lot of learning disabilities. We're going to skip those. So let's talk about some of the ways that learning disabilities actually affect students. I'm sure you can think of these. Just take a quick look at those bullet points and just think, especially the first one, learning the material. Obviously, if you have a hard time learning material and curriculum in the classroom, it's going to be difficult in various areas. And especially social problems. A lot of kids with learning disabilities are grouped into a one-size-fits-all label that they are dummy or stupid or retard. These kinds of names are used to describe a lot of students who have learning disabilities, and it really affects their self-esteem, their ability to gain employment later as they think of themselves in these lower standards, maintaining and relationships, friendships, understanding social cues. All these things are huge for these students who have these learning disabilities. Now the big part is, what can we as teachers do for these students? And these are just some small ideas of very simple things that can go along in the classroom that don't take really a lot of extra time but can help students. So first off, direct instructions, just being clear. Scaffolding, don't skip steps as you're explaining what's going on, but take the students by the hand, essentially, in your words. Use diagrams and pictures, model what you're going to do for them, explain the process, and then show them how you're going to do it. Engage them with process questions. Ask them, okay, what did we just learn? How did you do it? Help them understand time management. Give them quality feedback. Just because they have a learning disability doesn't mean that they are any less than other students, but give them the same kind of feedback. Push them hard. Expect them to do great things. And use your resources. There's so much that is offered to teachers to help their students. So I just kind of wanted to do an activity with you to kind of show you what it might be like to have a learning disability. Oh, and this video is not working, so we're just going to forget the video because the words are still there. So what you're going to do is you're going to take out a piece of paper, and this is kind of just a simple activity. I'm sure you've done it before, but you're going to take out a piece of paper right now, and if you are right-handed, you're going to use your left hand, and if you are left-handed, you can use your right hand, and you're going to have 30 seconds, time that would probably be pretty sufficient for you in normal situation to write this sentence here. So I'm just going to give you 30 seconds starting right now. So go ahead, just write that using your opposite hand. And actually, I'm just going to have you pause the video to finish this activity, but I want to just finish up by saying the students who have learning disabilities are just like everybody else. They go through the same emotions and problems that we do, and there are so many resources that we as teachers have that we can help those students with. And I think the biggest thing is, first off, just being aware, knowing what's going on and knowing how we can help, looking for resources and being willing to take the time to look at those students as normal beings, normal humans, and see, we all have problems learning different things, and we all struggle with life, but these are students who really need our help. So I hope that you can find success as you go forth and become a teacher. Good luck.